Now, a friend of my friend's, his name was Kyle, and he used to go hunting quite a lot. This took place in the summer of 2012 when he was 18 years old. Kyle and his dad love to go hunting, and they go hunting pretty often. They mostly go hunting for elk, moose, possibly deer at times, but they don't usually hunt for moose often. They normally go for deer and possibly elk in the woods, as the bucks were the jackpot of the hunting trip. Now, this was one moment that prevented Kyle and his dad from ever hunting for a while. They were visiting Nova Scotia in the summer, so it was around the time when school was out for the whole summer. They went to a pretty popular forest that I can't really remember, but it was notorious for hunting. So when Kyle and his dad got there, they ended up going over to find a hunting tower, to which they were trying to find a decent kill. Now, they found a few raccoons, skunks, and even some hogs and etc. They didn't find anything out of the ordinary, but occasionally when they go hunting, they would always find a bear. However, though, they found something automatically really different. When they were at the hunting tower, Kyle said he spotted something in the woods that looked like it had antlers. He and his dad decided to climb down and decided to go kill the deer here for hunting. However, though, as they were getting closer, they started to see that something was really odd. They didn't know what it was, but it looked like if something was having their back against them. Of course, they were a couple feet away, but this was honestly different, as Kyle and his dad never came across anything like this while hunting before. At first, they thought somebody could be pulling a prank, to which Kyle said, "Hey, who are you?" Whatever this thing did turned around slowly, and it looked like it was about a couple feet tall, taller than them to be exact. It had what seemed to be antlers of a deer, and it did have long, skinny arms, and it looked like it had the hooves of a deer. Whatever it was staring directly at them for a while. Kyle honestly don't know what to make of this and think that this creature was going to jump out at any second. They were getting ready to run whenever this thing slowly began to approach them. It was walking at least one step, while growling and even having heavy breathing. Whatever happened next was something that still sticks with them to this day. It let out a loud screech as Kyle and his dad started running through the forest just to get away from this thing. It chased after them, but Kyle eventually fell in a ditch and stayed hidden as far as he can. And while this thing was near the ditch looking for Kyle, it then gave up within 5 minutes and then turned around and walked back the way it came. Kyle stayed under there for what seemed to be extra 10 minutes just to make sure this thing would go away. When he climbed out of the ditch, he looked to see that that thing was gone and that there was no trace of it with the exception of footprints. Kyle saw his dad, who came with a ranger who happened to be the ranger of the park. However, they explained their best of the thing of whatever it was, and the ranger said it could have been maybe just some prank. He just dismissed it as a prank, and Kyle and his dad never went hunting for at least a year. Whatever they had encountered that day was no deer or human or anything known to man. But they never encountered anything like that creature ever again. And they don't know what could have happened if the creature was still there. All the possibilities are endless. This took place sometime when my friend, which we'll call him Connor, was about 12 years old at the time. This took place in the summer of 2005, and he was 12 years old at the time of this story. Connor honestly loved going on adventures, especially when he's with his friends. However, though, this was just before her school was going to begin for the first time ever since 2 months of being off. So Connor decided to go do an adventure with his friend, which his name was Andy. Andy was at least a year younger, and they always been friends ever since they were kids. However, they ended up deciding to go for a walk in the woods just to see if they could find anything out of the ordinary. However, as they were walking in the forest, they ended up spotting what seemed to be an old cabin. The cabin looked as if it was been abandoned, but when they walked inside, it looked like it was furnished and there was nothing dusty or anything. It somehow might be something that maybe someone might have owned the cabin. However, though, Andy, along with Connor, didn't really know who it was or what that cabin was there for and who was living there. They ended up just playing around and just did what normal kids like them at their age like to do. However, though, they were just playing around when all of a sudden they heard twigs and branches snapping. They honestly thought that it could have been a mountain lion out there or possibly a bear, and that they should stay inside the cabin. They waited in there what seemed like a while, and whatever walked up was near the window and probably didn't notice them, but it looked like it was hunched over and it was like standing on 2 feet. They had never seen a creature like that before and didn't want to spook it or at least get its attention to know that they were in the cabin. Connor whispered to his friend Andy, saying that they should get out of here once that thing leaves, as it could be maybe a prank or something. They heard a loud shriek as this thing started to run around the cabin a couple times. This honestly freaked them out. They probably sensed that they were in there and that they were too scared to call for help or make a run for it, as they were afraid this thing would be there. They stayed in the cabin and waited for what seemed to be like a while. Luckily, Connor had a bag full of food and water, so it was just limited, just enough to make it through the day if necessary. However, though, this thing did not leave, but they had no idea what this creature was. At first, they thought it might have been one of their pranks from school that their friends would pull, but there was no evidence thinking it could be any of their friends. Connor then looked out from one of the windows to see the thing in the distance. It looked like it had a bony tail with the hooves of a deer, and it looked as if it was a Wendigo. That was exactly what they were, and Connor has heard stories about them, especially from the Native Americans that tells this story. They honestly had no idea how long this thing was going to be there for, but they decided to stay put as long as they can. After they stayed put for a while, it suddenly turned around to see something, or what seemed to be flashlights. It was around sundown, so the sun was setting. It then took off back into the deep woods, letting out a loud shriek. Connor and Andy's parents came, and they asked them why they were gone for too long. They explained to them about the Wendigo, but they all of a sudden froze. Their parents froze and said that they should come back to the house. They left the cabin and headed back to their homes. Of course, they were grounded for at least a month, since they had been out there for way too long and worried their parents. However, though, his dad ended up giving a backstory of the Wendigo and explained that they are the most dangerous creatures of all land, only being found in Canada in certain places. The last time Connor and Andy ever went to the cabin was probably after they got ungrounded, and it was during the fall. They approached there on the weekend, and when they got to the cabin, they couldn't see anyone, but they saw what seemed to be the windows. Those were smashed, which basically meant glass in the ground. Door was busted open. There was even some dry blood and etc. They had a realization that someone else might have been there and probably didn't get as lucky as Connor and Andy did. They never went back to that cabin again, and they wondered if that Wendigo is still there. He probably is still there, but they are not returning to find out. For some context, this actually happened to one of my mom's friends named Linda, and she used to drive in the forest quite a lot. This took place in the summer of 2008, and Linda remembers this just briefly. I do apologize if the story seems short, but this is what I can have described by Linda. Linda was working the night shift, what seemed to be at the local gas station. It was out of town, so normally she'd take the back roads as the highways were a bit busy at some days. Most days they were pretty quiet because Linda's shift ended at 6. Well, not 6 p.m., but they ended around 2 a.m., so the drive home was pretty quiet. Same with the back roads too, but however though, Linda got out an hour early as it was Friday, but unfortunately the highway was kind of backed up and delayed when she got out of the gas station. So she turned around and went to the back route. As she was taking the back route, it was an area where no one was out at this time, which it was obvious since it was obviously in the late hours of the night, aka super early hours in the morning. So she had her high beams on the entire time. As she was driving, she was listening to music when all of a sudden she suddenly saw something about a couple feet away ran across the road. She slammed on the brakes, which thankfully she didn't hit whatever it was. It ran from one area of the forest to the other. Linda pulled over and grabbed her flashlight to see if anyone that she almost hit was okay. "Are you there? Hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to almost hit you there." She called out a couple times, but she didn't see whatever it was. She called out a few more times, but to no reply. She then looked over to see that there was some branches and twigs that had been broken off of the trees. And it looked like it was something that was not human. There was definitely no bear, as no bear would run in all in 2 legs at once. But then she ended up looking over to see that there was a loud shriek in the distance. That was her cue to get out of here. After this experience, Linda never worked the night shifts again, and she's never taken that back road again, even late at night ever again. She still doesn't know who it was or what that thing was, but she clearly does not want to know. This took place in summer camp of 2016, and this happened to be one of my friends, which we'll call her Roxanne. Roxanne was a camp counselor there, and she had pretty good fun experiences. She did have some times where they weren't really good, like when campers that didn't like her pulled pranks on her, to at least putting something really dangerous like a rattlesnake or possibly a hornet's nest, whatever it was. However, Roxanne encountered something that she really dreaded. Of course, it caused the summer camp to be closed down, which I can't remember where in the area it was. This was taking place during the last summer camp of the season, before the winter was going to hit. It was sometime late in August, and this happened in 2018. Roxanne used to go to camp there quite often and never had any issues. However, it wasn't until the nighttime when something started getting weird. The first night on the final week of camp, which was Monday night, as Roxanne was sleeping, she heard what seemed to be tapping on the window. So at first she thought it might have been a tree branch or maybe just some camper trying to mess with her. She looked outside but couldn't see anyone, so she thought that maybe she was hearing things. When she went back to bed, she all of a sudden woke up to what seemed to be a scream of a kid. She honestly looked around and got the campers to stay in the cabin with the other counselor until she got back, but she couldn't find any trace of anyone. She honestly forgot about that on Tuesday. The Tuesday night, which was the second night, And the next thing was something really more creepy. She ended up looking over to see that when she heard what seemed to be footsteps approaching one of the cabins. A few cabins that were not far from where she and her campers were, there was this strange creature. It was standing about maybe almost 10 feet tall. It was a bit hunched over. It had hooves of a deer and even antlers. But it was staring at the door, but it didn't notice Roxanne getting out. Roxanne slowly crept back in and made sure the cabin door was locked. And then she ended up hiding somewhere. She honestly didn't want to go out, thinking that whatever it was could be outside waiting for her. She ended up staying there in the cabin for the rest of the night and didn't even get almost no sleep. Wednesday night was something else. On Wednesday night, one of the camp counselors said that they got injured by something. And when he showed her, it seemed to be a really huge gash on his arm. Fortunately, though, he was able to stitch it as best as he can, being the doctor of the area. But, however, there was no trace on what it was, as it somehow ran so fast it slashed his arm. But he didn't get a good look of what it was. Roxanne thought that maybe it could have been some camper, or maybe just something pulling a prank. But when she remembered whatever that creature was that stood outside one of the cabins, not far from her, she explained it to him, and he thought that maybe Roxanne was just daydreaming, or maybe she wasn't getting enough sleep. Not really a lecture, but just making assumptions. However, it wasn't until Wednesday night, but they went peaceful after that. Thursday night, however, was when something started to go weird. One of the campers had somehow got injured last night when they went out to use the bathroom. However, though, they were sent home as they had really bad injury and traumatizing experience, so their parents came and picked him up that day. But they didn't even understand why or what was going on, and Roxanne was to take the blame that whatever it was probably just some camper, or maybe someone is sneaking into the camp just to start shit. However, Friday was definitely the last day, but it wasn't until later on in the early hours of Thursday when something happened. Early hours of Friday. In the early hours of Friday was around 6, and Roxanne usually gets everyone to wake up. Well, however, though, she didn't get everyone up till an hour later, or at least when the sun started coming out, because she looked out. She could see that there was this creature that was staring directly at her from a few feet distance. It happened to be the Wendigo that she had encounters with a few nights prior. Whatever it was started walking towards her, and Roxanne thought that this was going to be the end of her life as this thing approached her in a couple steps. Whatever it was that got shot through the side by a gunshot. Fortunately, it was one of the camp counselors that saw the creature, and whatever the creature was started to try and attack the camp counselor before he got shot in the chest. The Wendigo ran off into the distance, let out a loud shriek, and disappeared into the early hours of the morning. Roxanne asked the camp counselor if he was okay, to which he said he was fine. After they released all the camp kids at 7 a.m. to wake them up when the sun came out, they didn't tell the kids what they were seeing, as they didn't want to frighten them. However, though, they all could assume that it was some creature known as the Wendigo, which it was their right explanation. Whatever this Wendigo wanted, it was trying to haunt the area, but since they didn't have any evidence that it was the Wendigo, they couldn't really report it to the police. All they could really do is that something or someone has been haunting around the camp, or at least trying to stir up trouble there. Now, after they released the campers, they did clean up a little bit. However, normally after the last camp of the season, they usually did some cleanup to get ready for the winter, to which they did, but Roxanne didn't. mainly because she was too afraid of seeing that Wendigo and wonder if it was still out there. She never went back to that summer camp again, and she still wonders, what was this Wendigo wanting to do with her? Why did it target her camp? She doesn't ever plan to return to that camp to find out, and she really still has no idea why to this day of what this creature was or what it wanted. But what I mean by was is because she didn't know what it was at the time. But now that she knew what it was, she didn't return to that summer camp again. Although the summer camp was closed down and it was abandoned, but of course someone bought the property in 2019, but I don't remember what they did to the property after that. All I could say is, to that Wendigo out there, I hope you rot in hell.